Well, China and Russia are now responding to that North Korean missile test, pledging to push their own initiatives to resolve the crisis. Our Ivan Watson joins us now from Moscow, where President Putin is hosting President Xi. Ivan, Russia and China are both in agreement that North Korea's nuclear program must be stopped.
That's right, and the two foreign ministries put out a joint statement alongside the meeting of the two presidents, expressing concern over this missile launch, not condemning it, however, according to the translation that I'm looking at. And they called on a joint effort to try to de-escalate the situation on the Korean Peninsula. And that would involve, according to their proposal, North Korea freezing its nuclear weapons program and its missile launches, but also the U.S. suspending its joint military exercises, large-scale joint military exercises with its close ally, South Korea. That is an approach that has been floated before by Beijing. Russia now signing on board and saying that it has its own step-by-step process that the Chinese are now supporting. A question will be, how will the U.S. respond to this Russo-Sino proposal?
We're just looking at the pictures of President Putin and President Xi. This is the third time they've met face-to-face. Ivan, just explain how strong that alliance is and what message it sends days before the G20 summit.
Well, there does seem to be a fair amount of symbolism here. Both of these countries, they are essentially geopolitical allies. They vote and veto together almost all the time in the United Nations Security Council. At this meeting, they announced $10 billion worth of new trade deals. And they're both kind of side by side when it comes to opposing the U.S. They often make statements saying that they do not want a unipolar world, they want a multipolar world. In other words, they don't like the system that the U.S. dominates the international world order. They want to help redefine that so that they get a greater say in that. And the image of these two leaders who have both been in power for years, who've had multiple contacts side by side, who have been expanding their contacts, comes in sharp contrast to Donald Trump, who has only been in office less than a year now, who is facing serious challenges at home on the domestic front, and only today has announced that he's going to be holding a bilateral meeting, for example, with Vladimir Putin at the G20. There is a sense of these two leaders in Russia and China who are very comfortable internationally and domestically versus Donald Trump, who's still trying to find his way while also facing significant challenges at home. There's a sharp contrast there, Linda.
You mentioned the meeting between President Putin and President Trump. This is a huge development, given they were only meant to briefly meet on the sidelines at the G20. They're now going to have a fully fledged bilateral meeting. What should we read into that?
That there's still a very improvisational feel to U.S. diplomacy under the Trump administration. The fact that this announcement comes out just days ahead of the G20 meeting, and then when you look at this Russian-Chinese example of diplomacy, where these two governments are working very closely together and announcing a whole raft of agreements, it just goes to show how still new at this game the Trump administration is. And also the Trump administration facing serious challenges, again, at home over its relationship with Russia and allegations that there were improper ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. This is a big question that Trump will face going into this, possible backlash at home to this possible meeting with alleged ties to Russia still under investigation with a number of different bodies within different branches of the U.S. government. So big questions here. And what's fascinating is that the Russian media and the Russian government often argue that Trump is being boxed in by other forces within the U.S. government that are preventing him from being able to establish warmer relations with Russia. And ironically, that is an argument that elements of the right-wing press in the U.S. make as well. It's incredible to see that synchronicity, apparently, or the parallels between Russian state media, the Russian government, and elements of the right-wing political press in the U.S. Linda.
Yeah, it's certainly the most anticipated meeting, and we will be watching it closely. Ivan Watson, good to have you with us from Moscow. Thanks so much. We're still ahead at the international desk. US-backed forces celebrate a milestone in their fight against ISIS. We'll show you what life is like for the American pilots flying above Syria.